So today we're going to look at how to do simple cell division in Maya. And this is just for a single cell using just an old technique of swapping out two models for one model. Right, so just something like this where we start with a model, a single sphere that's deforming into this pinched shape, and then over one frame it splits into two. It doesn't split, we actually just have three models. This one is visible, and then one frame later these two are visible and the other one is hidden. So just like a one frame switch. And if we use that with some other animation, we can make a pretty convincing division like that. So really commonly used technique. There are a couple of things we can do to help this. One is adding some secondary motion to hide that transition, and also making sure that the shape of the two daughter cells is very similar to the shape of the almost split parent cell. And for that we're going to use something called the shrink wrap deformer. We'll use blend shape deformer and a jiggle deformer to add this kind of little wobble at the end. So let's just go through all of that. So I've got this set up already where I've got a primary cell and then two daughter cells. And we're going to use these daughter cells first to deform the parent cells. So let's just take a look at how we're going to do that. So if we take half of the faces on the primary cell, or the central cell here, and then shift select the daughter cell nearby and go to shrink wrap, and then, so it's not quite fitting yet, but we'll fix that, and then select the other faces, so the remaining faces, and then the other daughter cell, deform shrink wrap, and then we just want to change the shrink wrap settings. So here we can just leave toward inner object, and then I think we just turn on 3 of these settings: closest if no intersection, reverse, and bidirectional. And then the other shrink wrap, we'll just do the same thing. And then you can see that if I hide the two daughter cells, that we have a nice deformation that matches the shape of the daughter cells, but it's applied to the primary cell. Okay, so now the thing we have to do now is actually just duplicate the primary cell in this state, because we're going to use this as a blend shape target. So I'll just move it over, and now I don't need those shrink wraps anymore. So I can just unhide my daughters here, and if I go into the shrink wrap, I guess we could just turn them off. Maybe I'll just turn them off and see if that works. Okay, so we just turned the shrink wraps off. I could just delete those nodes by going into Windows, Node Editor, mapping out the daughters, and finding these shrink wraps and deleting them. And I may end up doing that if it causes problems later on. Let me just hide the daughter cells for now. So we're going to use this as a blend shape target for our primary cell. So to do this, we go under Windows, Animation Editor, Shape Editor, and we're going to create a blend shape for our primary. And normally you would add a target for this. So normally you just add a target, and then you can tweak the shape at a component level or with other deformers, and then you get that as a keyable attribute. I'm just going to delete this. We're going to do this differently. So we'll select this blend shape, and then select the deformed version of our primary cell and go to Create, Add Selection as Target, and it does the same thing. So we get a nice animation here, and I'll just hide this. So now we just do a few things to keyframe this. I'm not sure why this is green. That's weird. Okay, so just key that on frame 1, and then let's say on frame 30, get something like this. Key that again. And now we just do the 2-frame switch. Now I could tweak this to be a little tighter in here, but I think it's okay. Just do something like that. And then, so on frame 30, when it arrives at this shape, or it could be frame 31, but I'll just do it here. So the primary cell, I'm going to key the visibility. And then one frame later, I'm going to set visibility to off and then key that. So we just have the visibility turning off here after it achieves this shape. And then for the daughter cells, let me just unhide these. Now on frame 30, we're going to key their visibility to off. Just set a key for both of those. And then one frame later, turn these back on. And set a key on that again. So if I just deselect everything, right, so we get a nice little seamless transition there. And then we will select the daughters and just keyframe their translate X. I think that's both of them. Yep. And so let's say over, I don't know, just like out of 5 frames or so, we can move them out. Now I have to do these separately, so I just want this to move a little bit. And then negative 2.5. Again, this will vary based on whatever your settings are. So if we play the animation now, okay, so a little mechanical looking, but if we select our 2 daughters and go into the graph editor, then I can maybe really make it ease into this position. So I can select this keyframe and turn it to a weighted tangent and just drag this over, so it will just really slow, it'll be snappy out and then it will slow in. I'll do the same one down here. So this is the other daughter, translate X, curves, weighted tangents, and then we can just adjust this. So that's pretty good. I'm going to save this scene. Just in case. So now we're going to do a couple other things really quickly. We're going to take these daughter cells and add some secondary animation. So I'll create a blend shape for each one. So I just use Control 1 to solo the object selected. So select this vertex, go into B mode, soft selection, and actually I've got to first go to Windows, Animation Editors, Shape Editor again, and I'll create a blend shape for this one, and I'll add a target, and now I'll do this. So my animation will just be kind of blurbing out like that, and that's all there is to it. And then Control 1 to get rid of that, and I'll do the exact same thing for this one. Create a blend shape, add a target, go into vertex, and just drag that in a little bit. Okay. Oops. Okay, don't know what I did there exactly, but anyway. So now we will change this. So they're going to start off with their little bellies poking out, and we'll key these. And then maybe over a few frames, they go back in. Then over a few frames, maybe they go out a little bit. Doesn't seem to be working for the other daughter. Oh, yes, it is. Then over a few frames more, they go back to 0. Not sure why it's not updating here, but it seemed to work. Okay, so it looks like I have something strange selected here. Okay, so if I play the animation now, right, so there's a little animation there. I'm just going to correct it a bit with the, with the graph editor. And to select the blend shapes, we can right click on them and say select blend shape node. Yeah, okay. That's a little too tight. So we're just going to make that ease in or loosen that up a bit. Same thing here. So it's doing it for each daughter cell. So that's pretty good. Not perfect, but maybe it's a little slow. But anyway, let's not worry about it too much. So now we're just going to add the jiggle deformers. So I'll select this one and go to Deform, Jiggle, Jiggle Deformer. Just leave it at the default. Okay. And here, so a couple things to note. Jiggle weight, it works better. I don't know why, but it seems to, I've heard that it works better if you don't have a full weight. So go to 0.95 or something. And then we can play around with stiffness and damping. So I might want to lower stiffness and damping a bit. And then we can just play the animation. So it's this one here. And if we just look here, a couple of things going on. So actually there's more. If you look at it in the channel box, there are a couple extra settings. So motion multiplier, this can be used to reduce the effect of the motion or increase it, depending on what you turn it to. And there's also in the attribute editor this ignore transform. So if you'll just take a look at the movement of this, the whole thing is burbling back and forth, and that's because it's looking at the transformation of the entire object, but also the deformation based on the movement of the components. So if we turn on ignore transform, let me just deselect this, then you see the whole thing doesn't move, we just get the jiggle on the deformed part. So I'm going to keep ignore transform turned off, and then we'll just do the same thing for this one. Deform, jiggle, keep that off, jiggle weight 0.95 and 0.2, and this will vary, of course. Save the scene. That's maybe a little exaggerated, but that's okay. I can live with that. So now let's just add a shader for all of these things. So we're going to create a standard surface shader in Arnold. And, excuse me, output window. And we'll put a displacement shader on this. So just going to use some defaults here. I'll just use the clay default. Change the color a little bit. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. And then tab, start typing a displacement shader. We don't need the new shading group node that comes with that, so we can delete it. And we'll add, let's say, an AI noise. This will make the bumpy surface. You can use this, you could do this with a texture deformer here instead of a displacement, but you'll find that it pops between the two. Even if you have the same texture deformer on all of the different cells, the primary cell and the two daughters, there'll be kind of a pop that doesn't happen so much with the displacement. So we're going to take the AI noise, connect the out R to the displacement here, and then take the displacement from the displacement shader into the shading group for the standard surface, into displacement shader here, and then that's your setup. Now just a few things we have to do here. First of all, the AI noise will be way too small, the detail, so we can increase the scale. That's probably still too small, but we'll try that in a sec. And then for each of these objects, save my scene, under Arnold, subdivisions, Cat Clark, we probably want to subdivide a little bit so we can displace more, so maybe one iteration is good because it's already smoothed 4 levels. Then displacement attributes, the height is too high, so I'll just change that to 0.1. And then you have to increase the bounds padding so it doesn't clip. We'll do the same thing here. And then finally we'll do the same thing for this one. So by putting a value of 10, it just means that it looks 10 units out before it starts clipping the extent of the displacement. And we'll never get there because we've got a low displacement here. Save scene. And finally, well, we should probably apply that shader to these objects. And then these two. Just middle mouse dragging it over. And just so we can see what's going on, let's add a light. Let's hold down J to snap increments of rotation, 15 degrees, I think. And then let's add a floor. I should turn up the exposure here. And then we'll just do a little render so you can see what it looks like. Always save before you open the Arnold render view because you never know. So it's got to think a little bit for the first render, or it's crashing. Okay. I don't like the AI noise, so I'm just going to switch that for something else. So make sure you stop your render. So maybe AI cell noise would be good. So out color red. You just need a single channel from the color to go into displacement, and red is a good one to use. And one of the reasons for that is that if you take a displacement out of ZBrush, it looks for the red channel. So just good practice. So again, change the scale of this and just see what it looks like. Yeah, that looks a little lumpier. Sometimes the displacements don't update correctly when you make changes to the attributes. So if that's the case, just go into render, update full scene here, but mine seems to be working. My specular is a little bit high. So I'll just go back into the AI standard, turn up the roughness a bit, maybe just turn down the specularity. Anyway, it doesn't really matter what this looks like. We just want to make sure it looks good in the transition from one state to another. So anyway, I'll just leave it like that. And let's just go back to just after it splits. So these are the two cells, two daughter cells. Take a picture of that and then go back one frame. That is the single cell, the parent cell, the blend shape. Stop the render. So it's pretty good. So that's all there is to it, really. Yeah, that's a little cartoony for me, but anyway, you get the idea. That's how it works. And in the one that I was showing earlier here, the reason it looks a little more stop animation is because I took it into After Effects and I applied posterized time, and so it just skips every other frame and it doubles up the original frame, so it's actually animating on 2s here, sort of like 15 frames per second kind of thing. So that's all there is to it. I hope you find this useful and a way to apply it in your own projects. Thanks.